We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis in Mesechet Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 11b. The Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in a brayso, chulin hachulin kechulin. If a person says that this food of yours to me is like chulin, or it's hachulin, or it's kechulin, bein she'ochel lach ubein she'lo ochel lach. Whether the person says your food, the food that I eat of yours is like chulin, or the food that I don't eat of yours is like chulin, it doesn't matter which way. Mutter, in both situations, it's going to be mutter. Now, if the person says that the food of yours which I eat is chulin, obviously that's mutter, because chulin is mutter. If the person says the food which I don't eat from you is going to be like chulin, that could imply that the food which I eat of you is not going to be like chulin, but will instead be like a carbon, and it should be aser. And so therefore there's a chance to say that by implication it is going to be aser. And so you have to say that this brayso holds that an iser by implication does not count, because we do not say mechlal lav ata shomea hein. In any case, the brayso continues, lachulin she'ochel lach aser. If the person says lachulin, and now assuming lachulin means lo lachulin, that it shouldn't be like chulin what I eat of yours, that does create a prohibition. Now the problem with this line is if the person is saying the stuff that I eat of yours should not be like chulin, but it should be like a carbon, so that sounds like by implication we're creating an iser. So we just said in the previous line that this Tana does not hold of creating isurim by implication. So that's why some of the Rishonim take out this line completely from the brayso. Lachulin lo ochalach. Now if the person says it shouldn't be chulin what I do not eat of yours, so then mutter, so then it's going to be mutter, meaning what I don't eat of yours should not be chulin, meaning everything should be chulin, and therefore it is mutter. And the Gemara now says, Reisha Mani, the first part of this brayso, who is it? Rabbi Meir, it seems to be Rabbi Meir, the lesle mechlal lav ata shomea hein. Like we just said, Rabbi Meir does not hold that from the implication of a negative you can derive a positive. In other words, you don't derive the iser over here by implication. But now let's look at the end of the brayso. Lachulin lo ochel lach mutter. So the end of the brayso was, if you say lachulin lo ochel lach, that it shouldn't be chulin, that which I don't eat of yours, so then it is mutter. The problem with that is vatnan, but we learned in a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah later on. It says la karban lo ochel lach. If the person says la karban lo ochel lach, so Rabbi Meir oser. Rabbi Meir says it's prohibited in such a situation. And we had a difficulty with this, because again, this is also by implication. That which I am not eating of yours is a carbon. And so you're trying to derive some kind of iser by implication. V'kashalon, we had a difficulty with this Mishnah. Halesle mechlal lav ata shomea hein. Rabbi Meir doesn't even hold that from a negative you can derive a positive. He doesn't hold that you can derive the iser through implication, and certainly that Mishnah later on would have to be using some kind of implication. V'yomer Rabbi Abba, so Rabbi Abba said on that Mishnah, the interpretation of that Mishnah is as follows. Nase ka'omer, that when you say la karban lo ochalach, what it's really like you're saying is la karban yehei, you put like a comma. This should be a carbon. Lefikach, therefore, lo ochalach, therefore I'm not going to eat that of yours. In other words, you divide the statement up and you're really repeating the same thing. This should be like a carbon, and that's why I'm not going to eat that which is yours. So in other words, la karban lo ochalach, according to the way Rabbi Abba interpreted this Mishnah later on, is la karban lo ochalach really means la karban yehei lefikach lo ochalach. Now if that's how Rabbi Meir understands that line, so hachanami, so over here also shouldn't you interpret it in a similar fashion, meaning to say as follows, hachi ka'amar le, that the understanding of the Seifa where it says lachulin lo ochalach, and we say mutter, it should be interpreted like this, lo chulin lahave, it should be it is not chulin, lefikach lo ochalach, and therefore I am not going to eat that which is of yours. And so therefore it should actually be aser in the case where you say lachulin lo ochalach, based on our interpretation of the Mishnah later on by la karban lo ochalach, if this brayso in fact is Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara continues, Hi Tana, this Tana, Savar Lak Rabbi Meir Bechada, Upalagale Bechada. You'll just have to say that in this brayso is not Rabbi Meir, but this brayso holds like Rabbi Meir in some respects, and does not hold like Rabbi Meir in other respects. Savar Lak Kavase Bechada, he holds like Rabbi Meir in the following, the Lesle Mechlal Lava Tashomei Hein. This Tana of this brayso that we brought at the top of the Yom does not hold with the concept of Mechlal Lava Tashomei Hein. Upalagale Bechada, Bekarbon, but he argues with him in one thing, meaning in that Mishnah by carbon later on, in terms of how you interpret that particular line. The Gemara continues with another answer. Ravashi Amar, Ravashi says, Hada Amar lichulin v'Hada Amar lo lachulin. So there's different interpretations of what Ravashi is saying over here, but in any case, what Ravashi means to say is that there's a distinction between saying lechulin and saying lo lechulin. Demashma lo lahave chulin ela kekarbon. If you say lo lechulin, so that already sounds like you're saying it should not be chulin, instead it should be a carbon. But if you're saying lechulin, so then in such a situation you're not saying it should be like a carbon, and it would be mutter. And the way the Mefarish understands Rav Ashi's answer is as follows: Hadamar lechulin, da'amar lechulin lo ochel loch have mutter. If he says lechulin lo ochel loch, it's mutter. Avagav demashma masha ochel have carbon. Now, even though you can do an implication and say that which I don't eat is chulin, that which I do eat of yours is carbon, but we don't say that. Again, this brisa doesn't hold the mechlal lava tashomei hein, and lechulin will not be interpreted according to this as lo lechulin. And that's what the Mefarish explains. According to that other way of interpreting that we said earlier, lo lechulin lahave v'chulin, where we said this should not be like chulin, and then you put in the lefikach, I'm not allowed to eat it. Hani mili heicha da'amar lo lechulin. Rav Ashi was saying that's only if you explicitly say lo lechulin, not if you just say lechulin. If you say lechulin, that doesn't automatically mean lo lechulin. Avol lechulin lo mashma lo lechulin. According to the way the Mefarish understands this answer of Rav Ashi, lechulin doesn't necessarily mean lo lechulin. If you take a look, there are other interpretations. For example, the Ran makes a distinction if the lamed has a shva or not. What does it have, a shva or a patach? Again, various interpretations how to understand Rav Ashi's distinction. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said tar v'tamei noser upigul aser. All of these terminologies also can create an isser. Boy Rami Bar Chama asked the following question: what if a person takes a piece of meat and he says, this meat, I want to treat it, it should be to me like the meat of a karban shlamim after the zrikas damim, after the blood is thrown. Now the meat of a shlamim after the zrikas damim is actually mutter. So the Gemara says, 1 second. If that's the language the person used, he's saying it's mutter. That certainly would not create a prohibition. So the Gemara explains, the case is as follows. He has in front of him the meat of a karban shlamim, and also in front of him is meat of heter. And then he says, this should be like this. So the question is, what would be the halacha in such a case? Is he saying this should be like the essence of this, meaning in general, a karban shlamim is aser and this should be aser? Or maybe no, since the shlamim that he happens to be pointing to is after zrikas damim, so then he's really saying it's mutter, and it wouldn't create the prohibition. And the Gemara says, Rava says, Tashma, come in here, the following proof from our Mishnah, Noser upigul, the case of our Mishnah of Noser and pigul. We'll take a look at the Mefarish over here. Again, he's got regular meat and meat of a shlamim after zrikas damim in front of him. He just means shlamim in general, meaning the meat was aser, that it was aser before the zrika. Oh, kedahashta, or maybe he means the meat as it is right now. Kamoshi achshav shimutaris. Right now it's after zrika, and this meat is mutter. Tashman, the Gemara says, come in here, a proof that Tanan we learned in our Mishnah, noser upigul, talks about noser and pigul. Umashmanami, and the Gemara understands it's the same type of scenario. Kagon the machis besar de hetera v'noser upigul. In front of him is meat of heter and noser and pigul v'yamar zeh kazeh, and he says this should be like this, the same type of case. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph.